felt that we should find the people who best express the roles. We have Kate Blanchett playing the Queen Elizabeth. We have people who've never murdered playing murderers. That's the job of the actor, is to get into cultures, to roles, to positions, to lifestyles that aren't their own. The job of the director too. And so I very much believe, you know, that actors are actors, and I didn't limit myself in that way. And in a way, we just sort of looked all over. And when we did find Bangladeshi actors who could carry off the role, that was wonderful too, because then they could culturally contribute. And when we found, for example, Tannishta, who's Bengali, so understands the language and the culture, but isn't Muslim and not Bangladeshi, then you adjust. And we weren't making it just for a Bangladeshi audience; we're making it for an international audience.
What appealed to me when I read the script for the first time were like two things. As a South Asian, I felt it was a far more universal story, and it was not talking about a battered woman being beaten up by her husband and therefore she has to escape and she finds her own voice. But it's far more complex than that. Her husband can be a nice and adorable person, and yet she might have a vacuum in her life for other things. The other thing was that it had 9/11 in the background, and you know, the radical Islam movement, but it wasn't about that. It was about individuals, and it was more of a human story. So those are the two things that I felt were important for me when I read the script for the first time, that yes, I wanted to do a film which was not cocooning South Asian characters in the archetypical image. It's more human, and it actually deals with the complexity of the relationships and the characters and how they build up through a journey of through this woman, how she finds her voice through different things that happen in her life. That was actually the toughest aspect of the character, because the film is so much her, and she has very few lines. And you know, sometimes you might get roles where you don't speak much, but you have things to express. But Nazneen doesn't even express much. Everything about her is happening inside her, and actually in the film, she's the one who changes. If you look at the other characters, like Chanu, for example, he's boisterous, he's more extrovert, he's outward, but the shift in the journey of the character is very slight, whereas Nazneen's character goes through a strong shift in a very nuanced way. It's not evident from scene to scene, but you know, by the end of the film you do realize, yes, there is something that she found. So it was a meticulous process to actually pinpoint what to do and how to bring that about, because in the novel it's sometimes beautifully set through what she's thinking, what she's feeling. You have beautiful words to describe that, and how do you do that in a film in just a close, you know, so the eyes have to express those things. And I did alienate myself for 2.5 months, and used to just meet those women in Brick Lane, read the novel all the time I came back from my shoots, and just to immerse myself into the character. I tried to do that, to be truthful and not to play anything, but just to live that, so that there's no artificiality, but that I'm true to every moment that she's living in that film. I think that's the human aspect to the story that appealed to me, that you know, sometimes you do see a lot of the South Asian stories where you're talking about women breaking free means their husbands are really torturous and beating them up and locking them up, and it's not that. It's not those cliches. It's far more complex and nuanced. Of course, there is something obvious. There's an age difference, and there was nothing to begin with. But again, it also doesn't judge or make fun of arranged marriages. It just says that it's her life, that's what happens to her, and that's what happens in life, that we go through different complex situations and emotions. Someone asked me in England, how did you portray the scenes? Would Nazneen ever do that? And I just said that is what life is. You really don't know how you surprise yourself, and how life just takes you to different dimensions, and it takes a turn, and you surprise yourself by doing those things. And I'm sure that Nazneen would have surprised herself, but it might happen. I don't completely disbelieve it.
Well, I mean, I did feel loyal to the source, but you also feel that you have to do what works for the film and what works within a scene. I mean, I like to give actors a relative amount of freedom and hear what they've got to say, and if lines aren't working for the screen and aren't working within the context of the scene, then I will adjust things and try different things out. And then the edit's another process of trying things out. So I did allow some freedom.
What happens in the film is that you have three pillars, and three political pillars as well. You have Karim, who's born and raised in England, and he's far more radical in the process, and he's a part of that whole backlash movement where you want to be more connected to your culture through a specific mode. And Chanu is the typical first generation where he just cannot forget his homeland and he wants to go back all the time. And his connection to his homeland is really strong. And sometimes you do find immigrants of the first generation who have this whole strong tie, who think about their homeland as 40 years back, and they are sometimes far more conservative than what you find that country at this point of time. Whereas Nazneen, with her daughters, I think is a pillar who's trying to find that whole balance and the comfort zone of being in sync with herself. Like, she's still wearing her sari, she covers her head, she practices her namaz. She's not becoming underlined westernized by saying I want to live an independent life where I make my choices, and yet she does.
Well, I hope, like the novel story, you know, which really appealed across cultures and across generations, I hope that that's what this film does, because I think because it's a human story, we can all connect with it. It may be set in this very particular world, but it's about a marriage, it's a love story that explores different notions of love. And I hope it's a hopeful story about sort of how life circles and we get the opportunity to make different choices, to not endure, to change. You know, Nazneen changes. So I hope that all those things can reach a wider audience. And I had one notably interesting experience when I took it to Spain to a small, well, it was in San Sebastian, and a woman from a small village came, and she came up with her son and said, my mother wants to give you a kiss for putting her life on the screen. And I thought, okay, well, if it's connecting with a woman from a small Spanish village, at least it's reaching out to cross cultures, and that's one of the aims of it.
"16 years ago, she left the land she loved to marry a man she'd never met. And live in a city she'd never seen.
Your mother and I have decided that we as a family will return home."
What's Auntie like? As pretty as you and as naughty as you. I'm Razia. Hello.
You'll need a machine.
You can earn £1 apiece.
Thank you.
Don't thank me, it's a chore, man.
I have work now, and every hymn brings me closer to you.
This is nice work. What about your children? Who's gonna fight for them? We can't change things. Who can?
Sister, there is something I must tell you. Something is happening.
There are certain things a wife does not want her husband to know.
Don't make trouble for yourself. I already have. Give me my letter.
All these years, all these letters, hearing what your sister had to say, maybe I should have been asking what you are writing to her.
Don't you ever want to go home?
This is my home.
All this fighting talk that we are all brothers. My Islam is in here, and that is the only thing worth defending.
All my life, Amma, I have never heard you say what you want. Tell him you don't want to go.